Disclaimer for the episode, Mr. Holman goes to Washington. While we try to stay away from being overly political on the Truck Show podcast, we realize that to some listeners, this episode may come off as being partisan. However, every effort was made to have representatives from both sides of the aisle on the show. In my case, we were unable to meet directly with any Democrat congresspeople who only made their staffers available, and I was not able to do any Democrat interviews during our brief visit to Washington, D.C. TSP does not feel that the topic of today's show should be partisan. It is extremely relevant, and the outcome could have lasting effects on our entire industry and country. We would hope that the lawmakers could come together and it would be approached in a bipartisan, common sense manner. The Truck Show podcast does not believe one state should have the power to dictate policy in other states that did not vote for a particular policy, and our stance on EV mandates or any mandates that remove consumer choice and raise prices is that a free market should decide based on the current state of technology, real-world use cases, and the will of the people. Government should not be putting its finger on the scale and choosing winners or losers during this time of technological transition. Like SEMA, the Truck Show podcast takes a technology-neutral position, and we welcome all conversations about gas, diesel, hybrid, hydrogen, EV, or any other interesting technologies that develop. Thank you. All right, welcome back to the Podshed, and this is your host, Holman, and I just got back from possibly one of the craziest weeks on the road I've ever had between heading out to D.C. To work with SEMA and Congress, and then flying right back to Vegas to cover the Mint 400, which was phenomenal, by the way. We'll cover that in next week's episode. It's been a whirlwind. So last Monday, I drove to Vegas from SoCal, hopped on a red-eye to Washington, D.C., and met with SEMA, PRI, and lawmakers as part of SEMA's fly-in to support the automotive aftermarket and to urge lawmakers to prevent California from enacting laws and mandates for basically the entire country. I joined about 30 journalists, influencers, podcasters, industry representatives on what SEMA calls a fly-in. So they, from time to time, organize these fly-ins where there's an important topic and they get a mix of people to come into D.C., and then they set up meetings for you to go around the Capitol and meet with lawmakers, which is pretty awesome. So on this particular fly-in, SEMA organized this group on very short notice as the Congressional Review Act, or CRA, which you'll hear a lot about in the upcoming interviews, will be coming to the floor within the next week or two, from what we hear. So what was it like on Capitol Hill? In a word, amazing. If you love history and politics and the way our country works the way I do, there is no way that you could have gone on this trip and not appreciated the gravity of what we were doing there, or I guess the way the sausage is made, the patriotic sausage. I guess it's more hot dog than bratwurst. But it was phenomenal from an experience standpoint, and take away the things we talked about and everything. Just going to Capitol Hill was incredible. If you're looking at Capitol Hill, on the left side is the Senate chamber, and their offices are on that side. And on the right side is the House of Representatives in their chamber, and there's, I think, 3 office buildings. I went to all 3 of them. And from those office buildings were all the offices. I guess they choose them by seniority. And you have to kind of pick your way through and find it. And it's really interesting because these buildings are completely functional. You go and you wait on the steps outside. You enter through security. You're checked, x-rayed, all the same things, kind of like an airport. Once you're deemed safe to go in, you can just go walking in. We saw children. We saw all types of lobbyists, all types of other groups, people all doing the same thing we were, having meetings. The hustle and bustle was incredible. People everywhere. It felt like a mall, except you weren't going to the various stores to buy something. You were going to the various stores, I guess, to influence lawmakers or state your case. And the ones that we had meetings with were, it was, whether we met with the actual representative or not, were still really cool. I mean, you go into these offices, imagine the hallways are kind of lit with this artificial light, and they're this, depending on the office building, kind of this off-white or buttercup yellow color the whole way down. It's really devoid of anything, except for each lawmaker has this really beautiful wooden door in like a inset little alcove, very short, And then some of them have flags and from military service or American flags outside their offices. Some had other flags. And there's a plaque saying who it is and the office number. But the vibe in the offices were completely different. It was so cool to see just how they expressed themselves, how their staffers were set up, how the offices were laid out. None of them were the same. They were all completely different. So that was pretty cool. And each lawmaker's office definitely had, its own vibe. There's elevators that you can take. There are stairways that you can take. The elevators are interesting because there's always, say if there's a bank of 4 of them, the far one was always for members only. So you would have to not go in those elevators. You had to kind of fight it out with the public to get on different floors, and the members had their own. And then there were tunnels underneath that connected the offices. There was apparently a train, I didn't see it, that you can go over to the Senate side on if you need to go over there. I didn't meet with any senators, basically stuck to the House of Representatives. But overall, massive, massive win for SEMA. I felt really good coming out of these meetings. And I've got a few interviews for you. Met with SEMA's head in D.C., Karen Bailey Chapman. So got an interview with her. I also met with California's Doug LaMolfa, which I think was a pretty interesting conversation. Also met with West Virginia's Riley Moore. And then I met with the staff of Michigan's Debbie Dingell. Also met with California's Linda Sanchez. And the only thing I will say is there's definitely a vibe difference between meeting with the Republican side and versus the Democrat side. That was instantly noticeable when you walk in, and that's just my opinion. But some of the things that I thought were disappointing is when we had meetings with the staffers, they pretty much made us know that their representative was going to, or in these cases, congresswomen, were aware of the issues that we brought up, aware of the challenges, but still were going to vote along party lines. And I thought that was a little bit sad that I feel like the biggest problem right now with Congress is that both sides, and this isn't one or the other, put their jerseys on and they fight for their team. They become tribal, right? It becomes tribalism. And there's so many issues that the right move is bipartisan, that the right thing to do is common sense. But because they're so entrenched on their team and they don't want to break ranks, they don't necessarily do what's right, or they have a idea that they're basically going to stick with, and it doesn't matter how much convincing, which I thought was sad. I felt like we had some really compelling arguments that would affect many members in the district, from manufacturers to small business to workers. If this particular issue continues forward, they acknowledged those issues and said, yeah, but still. So that was not my favorite takeaway. But, I can't say that's going to be everybody in Congress, but certainly some of the people I met with, I just felt like they were very kind and cordial, and they took notes on our visit, but the minds had kind of already been made up, despite compelling evidence. Now, here's the thing for me, is nobody's asking you to stop your agenda. We're just asking you to put a brake on artificially accelerating it and making sure that we go in eyes wide open and that we let free market decide. That's basically why we were there. I think we did a great job. I think walking out of there, we felt really positive. Okay, so why were we there? Why is it important? Because Congress is in the midst of a examination that's been enabled by the Congressional Review Act, the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Air Act waiver that was granted last minute to California under the Biden administration for the state's what they call the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation. And the reason that this is so important is California has a rule, and several states in various forms have trigger laws that follow, maybe not word for word, although some do. These laws say whatever California does, we're going to do. So essentially what happens is California votes, makes a rule, and all these states automatically follow it. So with this waiver, California is mandating 100% EV by 2035, which is a de facto ban on ICE going forward. That means R&D is going to stop. That means manufacturers aren't going to invest in it. That means consumers aren't going to have choice. Vehicles are going to be more expensive. All those things. And if you're sitting there going, well, why does it matter to me? Well, those states that follow California represent like 40 or 45%, I forgot what the exact percentage was, of the entire U.S. population. So essentially, California is being allowed to set precedent and rules for parts of the country that don't live in California. And so that's kind of the background on it. So we went in and we wanted to amplify the message of technology, neutral government, and vehicle choice. There's a team of 31 of us, I think, comprised of SEMA members, content creators, journalists, industry people, a good mix of our automotive aftermarket. We descended on Capitol Hill for these meetings that were set up by SEMA, and we went in small teams, and we met with lawmakers and their staffs, and then we spent about 7 hours on the Hill and basically impressed upon Congress why California's ICE ban should be struck down and kind of helping to further the position on the matter. So SEMA and PRI's efforts to overturn EV mandates enacted by California are at this really critical moment right now. Federal lawmakers can use the CRA, which is what I talked about earlier, right? That's the Congressional Review Act, to determine the legitimacy of the Clean Air Act waivers for California's Advanced Clean Cars 2 policy. Again, that would effectively ban ICE and related technologies and future innovation. And of course, SEMA and PRI oppose the waivers and then support their immediate repeal by Congress. So in addition to the things that I mentioned, the proposed mandates will create this seismic shift in the automotive industry because it'll hurt small business, suppliers, even OEs, anybody that employs American workers that have certain technical skills, and create the blue-collar jobs that all politicians love. And of course, SEMA's position is that the specialty automotive aftermarket has led to technological innovation, making vehicles more fuel efficient, safer, and of course, appealing to consumers. And then right now, large automakers are losing billions a year in electric vehicle programs, despite the massive financial infusion of taxpayer dollars they receive from the government. And then, of course, the subsidies to purchase EVs. Right now, EV adoption is on the rise, including myself. I bought one. But I bought one, and I love the car. It's perfect for my use case. But as you'll hear in the interview, I went in there as a Californian who has a plug-in, who has an EV, who has a V8, and they're all for different use cases. And that consumer choice is important to me, and I think that's what legitimized my message when talking to Congress. But you got to remember the subsidies right now to purchase EVs. People aren't buying EVs at $750 a month or even $500 a month, not the mainstream people. You get them down around $200 to $300, and all of a sudden you're starting to move a lot of them. But what happens when those subsidies dry up, and what happens when consumers don't want to buy those vehicles anymore? And of course, my other concern is what happens to the secondary market. You guys have already seen what's happened to John Deere tractors with right to repair, and how the old mechanical ones are going for almost the same price as the new computerized ones. What I see happening, or even look at the old, P-pump Rams and 7.3 Fords, simple is better. People are getting back to that. Those trucks are extremely valuable in the aftermarket. What happens if we force the EV mandate and now all the secondary cars that you would buy as a used car, either as a consumer that isn't affluent or an enthusiast who wants to build something up, those cars are finite now. And so the average person who's looking for a new car, who doesn't have the ability to charge at home, who doesn't have a charging station nearby, isn't going to buy an EV. They're going to be forced to buy a used car, a used PHEV maybe at best, or a used ICE car that's older and pollutes more. But will they even be able to afford those? Because we're all going to rush to get those old cars in our garages because that's what we like and that's what we can fix. And now all of a sudden, those old cars might be as much as the new cars. So those are all the types of things that we talked about, including things like pull-through charging stations for trucks towing and all that. So ton of stuff. I feel like I probably gave away a little bit of what you'll hear, but that's okay. Wanted to kind of set you up for what the interviews were about. So the following will be some of my experiences on Capitol Hill. But first, we have to thank the companies that make the Truck Show podcast possible. The Truck Show podcast is presented by Nissan, purveyor of mighty fine trucks and SUVs. Take, for example, the 25 Nissan Frontier with its new sporty, fresh look, as well as an updated interior with an available 12.3-inch center screen. It's still powered by the standard 3.8-liter V6 with 310 horsepower and 281 pound-feet of torque, and it's backed by Nissan's excellent 9-speed automatic transmission. The Nissan Frontier S starts at just $32,050, and with a maximum towing capacity of 7,150 pounds, or an off-road package that includes Bilstein shocks a rear locker, and full skid plates, the Frontier is a midsize truck that's meant for both work and play. Or take, for example, the all-new 25 Nissan Armada that was designed with exceptional comfort in mind. This luxurious and capable body-on-frame SUV can go toe-to-toe with any of the competitors in its class. Point your browser to Nissan USA and find the perfect quality-built Nissan vehicle to fit your needs. Did you know AMSOIL was started by fighter pilot Al Amatuzio back in 1972 with the game-changing 10W40 synthetic motor oil? This means they're the ones who started synthetic motor oil. AMSOIL continues to innovate with a wide selection of synthetics that are formulated, blended, and packaged right here in the United States. These specialized lubricants are engineered for what you drive and how you drive. AMSOIL's catalog includes truck and passenger car oils with formulations specific to high mileage, hybrid, diesel, and you can't ignore the industry-leading Signature Series. With coverage for ATVs and UTVs, small engines, and even greases and car care products, AMSOIL has your whole fleet covered. And by using AMSOIL's Shop By Vehicle tool, selecting the right motor oil for your application is easy. AMSOIL.com offers package-sized recommendations to maximize savings, including AMSOIL's Ultimate Oil Change Kits, which ensure you have everything you need for an oil change, and it all comes to your door in one box, including the filter, gloves, funnel, and even a reminder sticker that's shipped right to your door. AMSOIL offers the protection you demand and the performance you deserve. Get yours today at AMSOIL.com. We recommend Kershaw knives. All Kershaw knives come with a limited lifetime warranty, and repair parts are available through the website. Kershaw knives also include lifetime sharpening, and the lineup has everything you need from EDC knives that can be used and abused for under $50, all the way up to high-end collectibles. Thanks to our generous partnership with Kershaw Knives, the Truck Show podcast listeners can get 40% off MSRP and free shipping over $50 by using the code 25TSP40 at checkout. It can be used more than once and even includes automatics. Support the Truck Show podcast and get yourself a Kershaw knife today. And when it comes to amazing vehicle-based adventure content, how-tos, and great storytelling, only one brand is doing it right in the print magazine space, and that's OVR, Outdoor Vehicle Recreation. OVR is about getting out there in our vehicles to explore and discover the world around us. Get complimentary access for a year to the digital library or a discount on your print subscription today at OVRmag.com. Use the promotional code at Truck Show Podcast. The Truck Show Podcast survives off your reviews and sponsorships. Please help me to keep it free by leaving reviews and comments on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and by supporting our sponsors.
The Truck Show. We're gonna show you what we know. We're gonna answer what the truck, 'cause truck rhymes with the Truck Show. We have the lifted, we have the lowered, and everything in between. We'll talk about trucks that run on diesel, electricity, and on gasoline. The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show. Oh, oh.
It's the Truck Show with your host, Holman.
That's right. This is the Truck Show Podcast, and I am your host, Holman, and lots of great interviews coming up. So we'll start with Karen Bailey Chapman from SEMA. All right, I've made it to Washington, D.C. I have not been here for, it's probably been 10 years. And I'm with Karen Bailey Chapman, who, if I'm correct, your title is Senior VP of Public and Government Affairs.
You got it right on the first try.
That is a lot of words.
It is a lot of words.
So we always joke on the podcast, the longer or the more words in your title, the more important you are.
Sure, if that's the way you want to look at it, I'll run with that. But basically, it just means I oversee all of the advocacy work for SEMA and PRI.
So this is a little bit different from a different side of SEMA that most of our listeners might not be as aware of. I think people know the SEMA show. I think people know SEMA Garage. Those are the things that are a little bit more consumer-facing. Mm-hmm. You handle all the legislative stuff. You're on Capitol Hill. You guys are putting together plans for advocacy and lobbying and connecting the pieces between industry and lawmakers to make sure that the automotive aftermarket has a path forward through the legal side of things.
Exactly. Everybody knows this, obviously, for the show. And the fact is that we actually do other stuff all 365 days of the year. And advocacy, unfortunately, does not stop for the show or for the holidays or for the weekends or whatever the case is. But that's something that is a huge part of the work that we do that doesn't always get seen every day, although we're trying to improve that a little bit.
Now, I would have made a joke like, are you allowed to leave D.C. because of how important it is? But we've met in Moab before. You own a Jeep,
Yep.
and you go adventuring out west. So you're actually an enthusiast and somebody who, in your personal life, enjoys what the automotive aftermarket brings. So you're actually bringing your expertise with your background as well as your personal interest to your job.
It's one of those dream jobs that you have in Washington, which is actually not typical, and that's where your personal passion can match up with your professional path. And so I consider myself really lucky to be in that position. Actually, when everything kind of came down with the CRA and everything we're dealing with this week, and while you're here, I looked at the calendar and I'm like, this better be done by Easter Jeep Safari, because I have 2 weeks blocked off to take my Jeep out west to go to LA first and then go up to Moab. So I was like, this better be done by Easter Jeep Safari.
We're in the same boat because I bent the axle on my 392.
Oof.
And so I just got it fixed. And when SEMA reached out and said, hey, is this something that you'd be interested in? I'm like, what's the date? Because I've sort of like got this little narrow window,
right.
And it's a really narrow window. It just so happened that it worked. So we are in the Washington, D.C. office, which is a charming building. I'm in a conference room that has a fireplace.
Not workable.
Shh, they don't even know that.
Okay,
No,
okay.
this is we'll set up the ambiance. There's chandeliers from the ceiling. There is crown moldings and old oak doors. So what's the story behind this building? Because it's charming and very. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, the actual story, the non-sexy part of it is, or I guess depending if you think it's sexy, this is the old Baltimore Sun building. So It's actually a historic building on the historic register. Now we could also create the fantasy story of what we make up about this office in the building, and it's probably
there's the romantic side of it. Then there's like, oh, it's a historic building, so we really can't upgrade it the way we might need to.
Right, exactly. It doesn't exactly scream chrome and innovation and fast,
Sure.
but. We just sort of imagine this is sort of that quintessential image people have of Washington,
It feels like
DC,
old school DC.
Of like smoke-filled back rooms.
Can we smoke cigars in here? I feel like this would be the perfect room for it.
You know what? No one's going to tell.
I feel like this room had a bunch of guys with fedoras and like feather with like a press in their band, smoking cigars, figuring out like what they were going to accomplish on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at the pictures downstairs in the lobby as you come into the building, there's actually old pictures of when F Street, which is what we're located on, didn't have asphalt or pavement, and it had horse-drawn carriages and sort of, the craziness.
And now it's full of Ubers, and I did notice, and I hadn't been to DC in a while, and I actually really love this city. This city is incredible. The history, obviously one of the oldest places in the United States in terms of when civilization and modern society kind of started. But the buildings, the layout, the places, I mean, it's just really amazing. It's like I'm sad I'm only here for a couple days because I would spend a week here and not run out of things to do. And I really do love coming here. But it's one of those places that is, you could say it's a national treasure. It really is a national treasure. Mm-hmm. How far is this office from Capitol Hill?
Well, we're 2 blocks from the White House.
Okay.
And we are technically 13 blocks from the Capitol because, we need to have things very orderly here. So 1 through 13, we're at 13th Street. So they make it really easy.
Well, I was excited to see that when I arrived that I would be just at home as if I was in any other major metropolitan, even though Washington, D.C. is an incredibly old city, because I found a litany of dead rental scooters just laying in parks and on the sides of the roads.
It's like a South Park episode.
Yeah, it is. I was waiting for the Lime scooters to all like stand up and start chasing people. So I did feel like, as old and quaint and backdoory and all the things you see about DC, it is very modern in the sense that there's Ubers, lots of Teslas, and Lime and otherwise electric rental scooters just hanging out places.
It is an easy way. I actually have my own scooter just because I felt like I needed to evolve into the scooter lifestyle. I always kind of look down on the scooter.
And how's that going for you?
It was great, but I need it modified. Like I feel like it's just too slow, and it needs a bigger tire for, when it's in a stickier tire for
now,
when it rains.
Does that fall under SEMA, or is there another trade organization or industry organization that handles modification of scooters?
The way that, I don't think there's a modification scooter association, so I think it's perfect opportunity for SEMA to step in that place.
There, yeah.
Look, if it's got wheels and it moves, are we really going to judge?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about SEMA in DC. Tell me a little bit about kind of what is your day-to-day here. There's probably members listening going, okay, I know that SEMA sends out press releases, the SEMA SAN, SEMA Action Network. I get these emails, and I might get a legislative update, or I might get a campaign in social media that's a sponsored ad for something you guys are working on. What does that look like from behind the scenes? What are you actually doing here?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's really unique about SEMA and us as a trade association is that we have a lot of different segments of the industry that we represent. So it's everything from the off-road community and protecting the access to public lands, which you and I are very familiar with as enthusiasts, to things like what we're dealing with this week, which is the electric vehicle and ICE ban issues, to taxes and tariffs and so many different things. And the thing is, even though that we're based in, automobile collectors' rights and right to repair, right to modify. So we have a vast swath of issues that we deal with. And it's not just here in Washington, D.C. I think when people think of politics, they always automatically think Washington, D.C. But the fact is that we're also monitoring and taking action in all 50 state capitals as issues arise that impact the industry. You
just happen to have your home base for the legislative side of SEMA in D.C., which is convenient. But again, you're going through all 50 states. Now, do you do anything in Canada as well, or is it mostly the U.S.?
It's mostly the U.S. We don't lobby in Canada, but we've had issues, especially with our racing community. This past year, we were having some of our members were having trouble bringing their race cars over from Canada into the U.S. And so a couple of the racetracks gave us a call saying, hey, our guys keep getting stopped. What can we do? And so we were able to talk to allies on Capitol Hill saying, hey, what's up? And we're able to sort of figure that out. So that's sort of the intersection that we deal with, obviously, with Canada, especially because we have so many racers that come in from Canada into our local tracks around the country.
Okay, so I'm here because this is part of what you guys call a fly-in, and that's when I'll let you explain it.
So what's called a fly-in, which is a very DC term, so we automotivize it by calling it a rally, appropriately so, but it's when trade associations and other entities here in Washington bring in people to go and lobby the lawmakers directly. For us, for SEMA, for the industry, we're sort of the first line of defense. Our lobbying on Capitol Hill and around town, we're able to sit there and tell the story, figure out the path of how we figure things out. But the most impactful part of our work is when we're able to bring in the people who are directly impacted by the policies being considered. So whether you're a small business or you're an enthusiast, or usually probably both, that's
okay. Raise my hand for that one. Yeah.
So being able to tell your story directly to lawmakers and make that connection, because at the end of the day, a lawmaker cares about what their voters think and what their voters know, and so it's
they should. In theory,
they should. In theory, they should. But this is the way to continue to reinforce it. And so being able to make that connection, develop those relationships between lawmakers and our members is really critically important to the work that we do, because at the end of the day, we're just mouthpieces, right?
Yeah.
We're the lobbyists, that dirty word lobbyist. But, look, I think lobbyist is a very misunderstood profession, but making that connection with the people back home and understanding how policies actually impact is really, really important to the work that we do.
And as much of a dirty word as lobbyists could be, I mean, really without it, your representation wouldn't be the same, right? You're bringing issues that are important to the constituents level, and you're having to fight out with a lot of other interests, right? I mean, you're vying time for people in agriculture, or people in medical or pharmacy, or people in the military-industrial complex, or on and on and on. People in manufacturing, people in tech, and so I can imagine that probably either makes you really good at what you do, although I think your subject matter is probably one of the cooler ones out there, right?
Right. I mean, car people tend to have a better audience on Capitol Hill, but, not always, because we may not see eye to eye on the policy issues that we are promoting. But I think that's also really important to the work that we do. We work with coalitions in town. So even in some of the work that we do, so it's not just, it's just SEMA. It's SEMA joining with other forces because we all have a shared interest on whatever the the policy may be. And then we're able to work together, and everybody kind of takes the chunk that they do best with and bring it forward. So I think that's also a big part of why being in Washington, D.C. and having this office here is having those relationships to be able to work together, because we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses. And so when we work together, we're able to really do some good work.
So I think maybe this is a question that my audience is wondering too. When you're lobbying, how much of it is precision with a scalpel, and how much of it is just pure bombardment with messaging? Because I think you'll see maybe on Instagram or Facebook, hey, this thing's coming up. Here, here's your senator, here's your congressman, your representative, or you put in your address tracker to figure out who your people are at the state and the federal level, and then it's like, here's the form letter to fill out, and you basically bombard them. But there's only so much bandwidth and so much time. At what point do they tune out? I guess the question is, are you balancing tuning out with delivering a message in a way that can be received?
Yeah, I think it's an art form, and it's a little bit of all of that. I always kind of use a military analysis with it. Is sort of, you've got your ground game as well as your air cover. Yeah. You're looking at left and right flanking, and so really it's a little bit of both. It's the shock and awe of inundating with letters, because congressional offices do take count. They obviously aren't going to read every form letter because they already know what's being said. But they do take a look and see. So it does matter. It does matter. And but the other thing is that we obviously have the direct conversations with lawmakers, so that's the one-on-one type time and with staffers. But then there's also the communications, and this is the part that I think this is really the important part of the SEMA Action Network, is the fact that we then also go and talk to the voters back in the districts or in the states of lawmakers that we are trying to get through to. Because again, going back to it, at the end of the day, it's the voters that put everybody in office. So is it weighty? I guess it's weighty on both sides. You want to attack them at the Washington side, but you want to make sure you're talking to their constituents, so their constituents are getting them back at home. So no matter where they are, the issue is still top of mind. Exactly. And also educating the voters that we're talking to on what are the message points that matter to the lawmakers. Because how you and I would talk about something is not necessarily how the average voter would talk about things. And so it's also helping educate voters about the issue, why it matters to them personally. Because look, the rest of America has real things to do in life, like soccer games and grocery shopping. Well, how many people log that past and they went, well, where did this come from, right? And it's just, you get busy with your life and you're not paying attention, and some people want to pass laws that way. They want it with as little scrutiny as possible. So without lobbying organizations or trade groups like SEMA to step in and make sure that there's awareness on the consumer side of things or the industry side of things, there'd be a lot of things that could probably sneak by without anybody ever knowing. It happens all the time. I mean, even the issue with internal combustion engine bans, people didn't realize, they heard stuff about EVs, and we saw this in a lot of the opinion research that we did leading into this issue, because we wanted to figure out how to talk to Americans about this. Is the fact that they all heard about it, but they didn't think of it well, I'm not into EVs, so I don't really care. And then all of a sudden it's on their doorstep. Right, and all of a sudden it's actually you live in one of these 16 states, so guess what? You're not going to get an ICE engine version of the vehicle you like to have. It's going to be an EV version or hybrid, or it's not going to, what you want is not going to be available, or this is the cost of what's going to happen. And so it's figuring that out and making that connection of why an American should actually care about an issue. And we as an industry are uniquely positioned to tell that story. I would think our industry, our average company, individual supporter, small business owners, probably more well-versed than the average industry. I would say, just because our passion and we might make our money doing this, but you've got a lot of hobbyists and things like that. So I would think that would help the cause out, and having a slightly better education about the issues, because you don't have to work as hard to bring people over to make them understand. Exactly. We have a tremendous amount of passion in the industry that we're able to harness, and that's, I think, what makes a lot of our efforts really successful is harnessing that, and it really is the strength that we bring to the table, whether it's on Capitol Hill or within coalitions that we work in, is that, I've worked in a variety of different industries throughout my career, and it's really painful sometimes and very expensive to try to get people to understand and to engage. But our industry, you know, I think sometimes we're almost like hold the reins a little bit, like, you know, everything will.
Let's work together.
Let's work together. Let's get on the same message, and let's work tactically together so that we can accomplish our goals. So I think it's an amazing part of the industry. It's why I was so excited to come work for SEMA, because I just saw, as a passionate person, as an enthusiast, that I knew what I felt like, and the fact that we have millions of others in that same headspace is really a huge value to the work that we do here.
Now, we'll talk about why I'm here and why the flying is happening in a moment. But one of the things you just brought up was the 15 states, the California plus 14 or whatever. And being somebody who lives in California, comes from California, has a business in California, I hear it all the time from people, oh, it's just a California problem. But what I tell people on the podcast or people I meet in person or in my articles or whatever is that California has become the incubator for some of the cancerous decisions that spread across the country. And there are many, many states, was it 14 plus, 13, 14, 15, that have laws tied to whatever California does, or what's called a trigger law, and it automatically triggers them to follow California. And people aren't aware of that. So there may be people listening going, oh, wait a minute, I'm not in California, why do I care? And all of a sudden, they just found out, oh, because if California decides, that's the way my state goes as well. And that's bad, because now you have one state dictating the outcome for a massive amount of the population. And so I always tell people it's important to stay apprised of California and what California is up to, because it tries to lead the way in doing things that you don't always want it to be taking the lead on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've had to overcome. So when California signed the Advanced Clean Car 2 Act in August of 2022, again, I think the rest of the country all kind of did the eye roll, oh, it's California being California again. And so when we started working on this issue to start educating, particularly at the time, it was 17 other states that have attached themselves to California in some form or fashion. Again, people had no idea. And so we saw that in particular in Virginia, where we went in and we actually, again, did some polling, and 80% of Virginians had no idea that they were literally attached to California. And it wasn't like, oh, California does this, and then the legislature then takes subsequent action. It was an automatic.
Yeah.
Now, not every state is designed that way, but that was a huge eye-opener for Virginians. And we embarked on an education campaign, a voter education campaign in Virginia, as well as a Take Action campaign. And so just interviewing, again, anybody that knows public opinion, knows marketing, knows any of this kind of stuff, to get awareness and to educate takes a long time. But the fact is when we checked this in, like, say, February of 23, by September of 23, we went from 80% unaware to 15% unaware. So a huge swing.
That's a massive inroads.
And across all political parties. So it wasn't just a Republican or a Democrat thing. It was actually Republicans, Independents, Democrats. And so we also saw that there is just such a huge unawareness, and how quickly we can educate on this when when it's really spelled out for them of how this is going to impact their daily lives.
So we've hinted at it a little bit, and the reason that you're having the fly-in and why I'm here is to advocate for the automotive aftermarket and to help repeal or revoke the EV mandate that has basically been given to or the law that allows California to have an EV mandate. So the problems with the EV mandate is that without ICE, an internal combustion engine, you don't have the choices you once had. That's number one. Number two is you have a state that's now dictating laws for other states and other people across the country. You have manufacturers that don't necessarily want to make two kinds of vehicles, so now you've increased the cost for everybody. You've removed choice from the equation, and then now you have people that are, underprivileged or don't make as much money or rural or have a need to tow their trailers, RVs, on and on and on. You start looking at that, and while it may sound great for an urban elite to go, oh, it's so nice, I get to plug in my EV every day. And it might be nice for them. I own an EV, and it's great for the particular use case. But like SEMA, the Truck Show podcast, and myself, we're technology neutral. So you're not advocating for the end of EVs. You're only advocating for there to be choice and for the market, the free market, to decide what technology it wants to win, and not to have the government put their finger on the scale. Not even the federal government, a state government to put their finger on the scale and decide the future of motivation for our society.
Well, that's exactly it. We are technology neutral. We like anything on wheels that goes. We just talked about electric scooters. Like,
right?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Like,
Who doesn't love
a good scoot,
yeah.
right? But the fact is that that's exactly it. Because what California does, and with now the 16 states that follow California in some form or fashion, that's 40% of the American consumer marketplace. That's a significant amount. And so the fact is that, then you look at the SEMA industry, 33% of our industry is internal combustion engine dependent. And so that means your exhaust, your engine, anything that touches any of that powertrain, these are all ICE dependent. And so when you look at saying we're going to wipe out 33% of an industry, and for our industry, that means over $100 billion of economic impact.
Massive.
Over 300,000 jobs, largely supplied by small businesses. Like, hold up.
Yeah. Because
a lot of people, a lot of the response, and I've seen this over my 20 plus years in Washington, is like, oh, well, you can just retrain, right? We've heard that with coal miners.
Right,
We've heard that with gas workers.
Now you're going to go write code in the Bay Area of San Francisco after you've been,
Exactly. And the fact is that you can't just switch an exhaust system product or assembly line or whatever it is that you're doing in that powertrain simply to EV, because guess what? There is no exhaust system.
Right.
And I think taking it even down to the consumer level, realizing that, Joe or Jill, the mechanic down the street that takes care of your oil changes and your brakes and everything that you depend on them to do for you, all of a sudden that's going to slowly go away, because as they, again, if you're forcing a change in the fleet and eliminating that choice, all of a sudden the variety that they need in order to stay open goes away. And so, there's just huge repercussions throughout the economy, throughout our communities that this will have. And again, EVs are part of our future. It's been a big part of the SEMA show for several years.
It's a tapestry.
That's a great word. Yeah. I love that word.
There's a lot of opportunity for EVs, but we're on the very leading edge of that. We're not at the point where it can replace where we're at. The other thing, you and I were talking off air, the record, but we talk about it here, is when I look at it, I see some parallels with even right to repair. And if you look at right to repair, especially in the ag space, you look at the people who are buying older tractors, and you look at some tractors that are 20 years old that are fetching massive values. So what I see about the EV mandate, and where that parallel fits into this story, is EVs are expensive. So what's going to happen is either they're going to have to be subsidized in some way to get it down to a price point that the average consumer, or match the average transaction price of a car, or the secondary market for used cars is going to explode. But that's going to have two impacts in my mind. One is it's going to make those cars even more expensive. So the car that you would traditionally go to if you're a used car buyer is going to be priced closer as a ICE used car to a new EV car. And then now you're also taking away potential project vehicles for people to modify, because now those vehicles aren't the side project in the garage. Those are the vehicles that are needed to get people around as transportation. They're no longer that second or third vehicle. That secondary market vehicle is now your primary vehicle, because you might live in a place where EV isn't practical.
That's exactly it. There's again a whole disruption with regards to the automotive market in general. I mean, we already saw that in COVID. So this is not theoretical. We already saw what happened in COVID when the supply chains when the OEs were impacted by the supply chains, and it wasn't just obviously the automotive industry that faced that, but we saw used car prices go up. Like I sold a used car just because I'm like, ooh.
I sold my 20. The only reason I have a 392 Wrangler now is because I was able to get a pretty fair amount for my 20 Wrangler, and if it weren't for the used car prices and the supply chain completely going bonkers, I would still be driving my 20 Wrangler with the V6.
I was very empowered because I went to the used car dealer down the street from where I live, and it was an Acura SUV that I used to drive, and it needed a new timing belt. And so timing belts are actually really expensive to replace, and I unfortunately do not have the technical expertise to do it myself. And so I remember talking to the used car guy, his name's Dave, And he's like, well, the timing belt needs to be changed. And I'm like, He's like, that's expensive, right? I'm like,
That's why I'm here.
And so he was trying to change the price. I'm like,
Yeah, I know.
Because I know this is going to last all of a week on your lot right now.
Yeah.
And so it was very empowering.
Yeah.
But all joking aside, that is the disruption that the automotive market writ large, used and new, will face if we're starting to force policies that's really going to just take everything out of balance.
Well, and the U.S. is such a vast area, both in weather and geography, and even the power grid is not one cohesive power grid across the United States. It's a patchwork of many different power systems. So infrastructure is a thing. We talked about towing. When you're looking at, the manufacturers are touting these EV trucks as being able to tow these massive amounts, maybe only 100 miles, but they can still tow them. Well, what do you do when you charge? Nobody's making EV, well, not nobody, but the vast majority, 95 or more percent of EV chargers are not pull-through like a gas station is. You'd have to unhook your trailer and then go charge for your 2 hours or whatever you need to be and hook your trailer back up, and that's not practical. So you're forcing people into technologies where we haven't even fully thought out the use case yet.
Right. And, you can ask my husband every time we have to hook up a trailer, I kind of disappear. I'm like, I'm busy. I got to go get something else ready.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, whatever we're doing. He's actually really good at it because he grew up as a farm kid. So he's really good.
And also he's gotten used to you disappearing.
Yeah, he just knows, he's like, can you kick the ball a little longer? I'm like, sure, I could do that. Yeah, no problem.
So why do you think California has been given the ability to dictate its own rules separate from the rest of the country?
Well, it goes back to the Federal Clean Air Act, which California was given exemptions to deal with pollution issues that were directly their own, meaning because of the geography as well as their role in the harbors and everything like that. But over the past, whatever it's been, 4 decades plus, actually more than that, they've really overreached. And that's the thing, is what got us here today and the conversation we're having this week and hopefully putting an end to what we're dealing with these EV mandates. This has been in the making, if you go back probably 20 years. Other states attaching themselves to California's emission standards didn't happen yesterday. It didn't happen last week. It didn't happen 2 years ago.
No.
Some of this stuff dates back 20 plus years. And so this has been a slow roll, if you will, of California kind of amassing this reach across the country.
It's sort of been able to build this little power center for itself that it is leveraging to in many ways act like its own country.
It is. And look, at the end of the day, the U.S. was created as 50 different states. Mm-hmm. States have a lot of power in what they can do, whether it's taxation or any other type of thing that they do. And so that's one of the cool things about the country. Yeah. But when you've got one state starting to dictate to half the country what the policy should be, that's not what we signed up for.
Sure.
And, I think in one of our early press releases a few months ago on this issue is that we're not the United States of California, we're the United States of America. And I think, I know everyone thinks it's cute, but the reality is that this is not how our government was structured. And quite frankly, I think, some states love what California does. Cool. Others are like, wait a second. Yeah. We didn't say we want to live there, we'll live there.
States' rights. Obviously, we have one of the most amazing constitutions ever made, if not the most amazing constitution ever made. But I feel like there are ways that it has been gamed over time that the founders probably hadn't considered, whether it's in technology or how things are implemented. And I think that, I guess it's common sense needs to kind of come back. I think that people have pushed as far as they were able to push, and they found out, we can get away with this. And so they kept pushing. And we've pushed maybe past the boundaries of or the guardrails that might have been in place.
Well, and I think that's exactly, the issue that we'll be taking everybody to the Hill tomorrow on is with regards to the Congressional Review Act. And this is it's a review of California's policy. And this is really going to be the first time Congress is going to act on really what California's power is and is not. And that's the big part of this is, I think we hear this a lot in our industry of carbs out of control and why do we have, know, but this is really the first opportunity to finally have Congress weigh in after decades to say, no, this is not what was intended. We're not doing this again, because that's the other thing that's been happening with who controls the White House.
Sure.
'Cause this has all been done through executive
EOs,
power. Yeah,
which
the
can be
executive
reversed
power.
by the next guy.
Right, so we've
and-
been on this
yeah,
pendulum
for sure.
swinging like left to right
Yeah.
to left, and which creates zero stability for those actually in the industry, whether you're an OE or in our
Sure.
aftermarket.
And our R&D is years in the making.
Exactly.
So it's very disruptive. You have to meet these timelines of when these emissions or these regulatory goals are, but now you don't know where to put your capital because you don't know the goalpost keeps moving.
It can change in 4 years,
Yeah.
and we've seen that over the past 4, 8, 12 years, quite frankly, is that pendulum. So I think, again, why this is so important for Congress to pass this is it finally kind of settles this back into the middle, reestablishes vehicle technology neutrality. It also establishes what California's power is or is not in this issue. It doesn't affect anything else California is
Yeah.
doing, but on this issue of EV mandates and ICE bans, it finally makes Congress weigh in on this issue. And so I think that's something that's going to be really important for the stability of the industry going forward.
Do you see this class of Congress, which seems to be more hands-off, and even some of the decisions through the Supreme Court, like Chevron deference, and some of the just not obviously Chevron deference doesn't have a direct impact on this, but I think it's a temperature check of where the laws are and where people are that unelected agencies can't make up rules for everybody. And I think you're starting to see some of that clawed back. Do you feel good? I mean, this is a simple majority vote. This isn't a 60. This is a simple, +1.
Yep. No, I think that's one of the great things about the CRA is the fact that it is a simple majority. Look, I have no doubt that I'm sure California will probably take the Congress, federal government to court. That's fine.
Of course.
Whatever.
That's why we have it.
Sure. That's the whole balance of government. But yeah, Chevron deference really, the overturn of Chevron really was helpful to us because it took, if the law is not specific, you can't do it.
So there is precedence that you were able to grab from that decision and apply to basically your thought process or your methods of moving forward in this case?
Well, I think it gives us some more positive positioning if this ends up in the courts.
Sure,
so
okay.
It kind of, again, sort of delineated.
It's like a backstop in a sense.
It's a backstop or a clarifying.
Okay.
I think the clarifying part of it's important.
So I know this is specifically to ICE, EV mandates, ICE bans, but you brought up California Air Resources Board, CARB, which we all know is a really, you can't say this because you have to work with them. I can say it, a 4-letter dirty word sometimes. All the time as a California resident.
Right. I was going to say
I can say so much stuff because
4 letters plus ER.
That's right. That's right. But is this a gateway? Is this a gateway decision that can impact going after some of those other types of things, like California having its own emission standards and things like that? Is that on the roadmap, I guess? Is this open a door to progress in that direction? Or is it even something that anybody has the appetite to tackle?
So I think, again, this is the one opportunity for us to really put some parameters around CARB's authority with regards to this issue. Is it going to impact their decision-making going forward? Potentially. You saw with one of the other EV mandates, which was in the medium and heavy duty, the advanced clean fleets, which SEMA sued CARB over, is the fact that they pulled that waiver request back. Because, and especially the constitutional questions we raised in our challenge with that. So I think it's going to make California think a little differently on how they have to approach this. So with Chevron plus this congressional action, should we be successful, I think it's going to force California to look at things a little differently. In terms of, is there going to be a change at the federal level about California? Will California get rid of their exemption? I mean, that becomes a whole different ballgame. And I'm an eternal optimist, but I don't think that's going to be a fait accompli for us to be able to do that, simply because it will require revisions to the Clean Air Act. And then we go back to the vote count of that will require 60 votes in the Senate. It just makes that a little bit more difficult, or actually a lot more difficult. But I'm always optimistic about looking for the opportunities where we can potentially make changes down the road. I don't think that change exists right here, right now, but the world changes every single day. The political environment changes every single day. So, I think, but I'm focusing on why this matters right now, because it does finally put some guardrails around California and helps us establish sort of policy going forward.
Do we feel good about this class of Congress?
We do. And I'm going to knock on wood because I'm superstitious in politics.
Me too.
I never talk about the campaigns I work on or how do you feel about this? Are you going to win, lose? Unless I know we're polling 80%
No
plus.
Bananas on a fishing boat. I got it.
No.
Yeah.
But the fact is that I think we were handed a gift this year. I think going into the elections last year, we were obviously very aggressive in the presidential campaigns and educating on this issue of EV mandates in key battleground states, as well as a handful of congressional races. But I think if you asked the team here, we would have said we're going to have a split government. We're either going to have a red president and a blue Congress, or vice versa, or whatever. We just figured it was going to be a split Congress.
Sure.
I think we were pretty comfortable. Republicans were going to take the Senate just because of the way the math works out.
Sure.
But we expected split. Which is not terrible. It means nothing bad can happen, but also means nothing good really is possible either when sort of people that don't agree with you are controlling the agenda. So when sort of the dust cleared with the elections and the president's party controlled all three groups, it certainly was like, oh, there's an opportunity. And I think there's some people that say, oh, we've got 4 years. Actually, no, we have 2
years because it's going to change over in 2 years.
Well, hopefully not.
Yeah. The election, the people,
but it could. That's literally, I always forget the data of, but it's sort of out of the last, 15 elections, everything but 2 have been change elections.
Exactly. And you're hoping with polling and the way things are going, maybe we keep it, but you're right. There's a 2-year window where that you can affect change in the direction that you want. Beyond that, you hope so.
Right.
You probably will be able to, but you can't. We
can't bank on 4 years, and I think that's one of the things that we're also trying to overcome. Is I think again we go back to that'll never happen. Well, it almost did, right? In terms of
really
these EV mandates, this was we almost got smushed, right? Yeah. And so it's a technical term, smushed.
I use it all the time.
And so, but the fact is that we've got 2 years, hopefully 4. But we really operate in this office on 2-year windows.
So if somebody's listening to this podcast and they're fired up and they want to support SEMA Action Network, what's the best course of action if they're an individual, if they're a manufacturer or small business that's not a member of SEMA? How can they get involved in the fight? Because I think SEMA sometimes gets a bad rap because of people grousing about the SEMA show. But they don't realize that SEMA is an organization that works year-round. It's not just a car show. That's an expression of what we do. It's the greatest car show on earth, but that's not everything that happens. You guys are working year-round, literally 365, doing all this in the background with very little fanfare. How can somebody get involved to support your efforts?
So I think, for the average person listening out there that wants to even just keep up to speed on what's happening legislatively is to go to SEMA Action Network, SEMASAN.com, and sign up for legislative alerts. It's free, it's easy, and you'll be able to, we'll inform you on stuff that matters, whether it's at the state, local, or federal levels. But then there's other ways. Obviously, I want to encourage people that are businesses that aren't SEMA members to become a member. There's a lot of benefits that come with that outside of the show, and one of that's being advocacy and having the ability to have lobbyists at your beck and call to take on. I sort of did some rough math one day because there's obviously a lot of trade associations around town. There's a trade association for everything. There's even a trade association for trade associations. But the fact is that I don't think you could have a cheaper cost lobbying group at your fingertips as a SEMA business member. So I think, again, if you're not a member today, become a member tomorrow. And, in addition to all the other benefits that membership provides, advocacy is a big piece. You can come play with us here in Washington, D.C. Even if it's not one of our planned fly-ins, we have folks that come into town and say, hey, who can I meet with? What can I talk on? And so forth. And then we also have the Political Action Committee, which is our ability to give donations directly to candidates for people that support us. Mm-hmm. We support. It's bipartisan. Not all these issues are as sort of polarized as the EV mandate, although that's starting to come to center too, as we saw again again in the elections. So it's not quite as polarized as it was maybe a year ago if we were sitting here a year ago today. So there's a lot of different ways, but SEMA Sands, the easy point of entry, SEMA business membership, I would greatly encourage folks to do that because there's just a whole host of resources that people can really draw from as part of the SEMA business membership.
Cool. And last question, when do we think that the vote is going to happen?
Okay, see, this is when I don't get into prognostications because it never works that well.
But it's soon.
It's soon.
Okay.
I mean, it could be introduced as early as today. And the intel that we're getting from the Hill is that it's going to move pretty quickly.
So we have homework to do.
We have homework to do, and thank God you guys are here today because it's been a wild ride over the past couple weeks, and we're excited about the prospects of this. And again, I'm knocking on wood. No guarantees. Nothing is ever a guarantee in politics, but we feel pretty good about this, and just really appreciate all the support people have done so far. I mean, we've generated over 10,000 letters into Congress, and we don't even have the resolution yet. And people are just anxious. There's been a ton of content creators who have been promoting this and helping us amplify this message and amplify the call to action. It's been huge. And so please keep at it, folks, and we'll keep you posted as this moves along. And hopefully we get a quick resolution so I can be at EJS this year. It's all about me.
I will see you at EJS, but first we got work to do. So
absolutely.
Really appreciate you spending time with me.
Thanks, Sean.
Next up is Representative Doug LaMalfa from California. All right, so I'm here with Representative Doug LaMalfa from California. So I'm with a fellow Californian who has a beard, loves cars, and you've been in Congress for
12 years and 8 weeks.
I'm interested in talking about you being a car enthusiast in Congress. Mm-hmm. Are there more of you? Because guys like us, we feel like maybe we're underrepresented in Congress, and it's nice to know you're the co-chair of the, let me get this right, the Congressional Automotive Performance and Motorsports Caucus.
I'm glad you wrote that down. I would have remembered all that name.
I wasn't going to remember it.
Yeah. Gearheads would be a good
I like
short
that.
name for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a handful there. My pal Andy Harris, he likes to wrench on, he's got an old Dodge they're working on, and a couple other guys, but it's not a frequent conversation around here. It needs to be more so. So I'm probably one of the ones that carries the torch pretty good on that, yeah.
So do they lean on you? Is it because of your California roots? Is it, because I feel like, our state is really the epicenter of car culture.
That's the thing. California really, other than Woodward Boulevard in Michigan, a couple places like that, California was really the hotbed of so much automotive, especially on the hot rod side. But, we used to have automotive plants there in Northern Cal and Southern Cal. Yeah. They built Mustangs not too far from me in Northern California. And I think Van Nuys had plants down there in SoCal. But California's just become unfriendly to all sorts of types of business and heavy regulations and this and that. So you see it moving to a lot of states that have, more friendly labor laws, I guess, is where a lot of the new plants go. I think Detroit ones are afraid to move out of Michigan because of some of the stuff that would happen. But that all said, yeah, it's a hotbed down there with, I think of, one of the big names would be Edelbrock. He was very early on making all those different heads and intakes and a lot of hot rod parts for the Ford flathead, and then the other V8 started to come out after that. And I've always been intrigued by those early rodders, especially. The flathead is just amazing how far that lasted and how far it was able to go. Even was it John Dillinger? Didn't he write a letter to Ford Motor Company saying, "Heck, thanks for making such a great car that goes fast. It's a good getaway car, an affordable V8." And some of the stuff they did to it ongoing there, like the Arden head, that?
Yep.
The Zora Arcus Duntov.
Yep. The Corvette.
Who became the Corvette guy. He was actually a flathead Ford guy before that.
Was he really?
Well, he designed those heads.
Mm-hmm. He's also the mid-engine Corvette guy.
Sure.
And finally they got that with the C8. They've been trying for, how many generations of Corvette to...
See, I'm also the owner of a De Tomaso Pantera, so Ford figured it out back in 1971. Mm-hmm.
You have a 351 Windsor in that?
Cleveland Motor Clubs in that, yes, sir. So So yeah, Ford beat the C8 to the punch, by about 50 years. So I'm a Ford guy, if you hadn't noticed.
Well, I do enjoy my Fords. I've got a few of my own, a '67 F100. I've got an old Ford GPW. I've had a litany of Ford trucks, Rangers, things like that. What else do you drive?
Where do you want to start? My daily cars, an 03 Mustang Mach 1 in azure blue, not too far from what this petty blue might be. I bought the 2013 Boss 302 in the color's called Gotta Have It Green. It's pretty lime green, kind of that gold sunburst when the sun hits it. And that's a really great car. At the time, I thought it was about the pinnacle of what Mustangs were, other than maybe what Shelby was out at the time.
Sure.
It's very well balanced, a lot of horsepower, naturally aspirated. You were talking blowers a little while ago. I like the simplicity of how far you can take a naturally aspirated engine.
I agree.
And run it out.
I love the sound of a blower, and turbos are fun, but there's a lot of complexity that introduces, and there's just something about a normally aspirated, air-breathing engine that's so awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not against the blowers, everybody, but I just like seeing what you can get. And I like being able to get under the hood and actually see stuff, So it's so that's why the older cars. I also run a '68 California Special Mustang.
Oh, nice!
It's a coupe. I have a
what color?
Bullet green.
Very nice.
It's called Highland green.
Black stripes on that one, or white?
It came with them. I left them off after I painted it. I wanted a little more lean look. I actually have it. None of the stuff in the grill here, so it looks like the Bullet car from the front there.
Nice.
And I even tried to put mufflers on it that kind of would sound like the Bullet car a little bit, because I love that movie and I love the whole culture of that car. As I told you, I actually got to meet the Bullet car. It was on an exhibit here at the Washington Mall a few years ago, and the owner there, who brought it out of hiding after so many years. At the same time, Ford had done a Bullet tribute car. I think this was 2019, and so the fellow there whose dad had bought it, that's a great story in itself, found that he saw the car in a Road and Track ad in about 1976. And it was a fairly hefty price at the time for a Mustang like that, but it mentioned it was the McQueen car.
And it was in a barn or a garage, and it had been kind of neglected for a while too, if I remember correctly.
Well, the father of that fellow that had it more recently, he had bought it off the ad. But yes, beforehand he'd bought it from some of the people that were involved with the movie production, and so I think that it had changed hands a couple times. The movie company owned it, and then a guy bought it, and then another guy with the movie bought it. I think how it went. Then the father bought it, gave it to his wife, who was a teacher, to drive to school. When the engine finally broke, they parked it in the garage, as he said, for a long time. And there's all these people looking for the car, all the Mustang, devout fans were saying, "Where is that Bullet car?" And I guess a couple different times certain people found it, like they got in the garage and stole the air cleaner, this or that, but nothing really bad happened to it. So finally the son, after his dad had passed, wanted to do as a tribute to make the car get on the road again. He didn't really touch it other than what it took to make the engine run and the brakes work and all that. So it still had all the rough edges from the old paint, and where Steve McQueen marked the tachometer to make sure he didn't over rev when he's doing, because Steve did a lot of his own driving,
Yeah.
So anyway,
Legend.
I could go on and on about the Bullet car. I should stop, but getting to touch and see and hear that car was kind of a big moment for me.
Well, I guess we know that you have car guy credentials, so that's good.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
So you represent the 1st District of California, which is Northern California, and you have a pretty rural, lots of agriculture, farmers. Do you have a truck? Is there a truck that you like?
Which one?
Any of them.
The one I bought brand new a long time ago was a '93 Ford F-150 Lightning pickup. Not this electric Lightning pickup. Don't anybody confuse that. I actually had a high-ranking utility official say, "Hey, you should get that Ford Lightning." Well, I have one back when it was actually the real deal.
Love that. And they only came in, 3 colors, black, red, and white.
The white didn't come in until a year or two later. So back in '93, I had to choose between black or red. And the white came later, which was perfect because you have that song, White Lightning.
And for anybody who's thinking about it, this was the normally aspirated 351. This was not the second generation supercharged 5.4.
Right, which is something else too. But yeah, this had 351 Windsor with the GT40 heads on it, made about 30 more horsepower than a standard Windsor. True dual pipes all the way out back. some tweaks here and there. I think the tranny had a little tweak. Had a slightly heavier frame than a regular F-150, lowered suspension, 17-inch wheels, which was a big thing at the time.
And they were cast aluminum, and they were directional because you kind of had that spun look to them. Very cool.
They did have that look, but you can put them on either side. Otherwise, I'd have them messed up. So, and a cool front spoiler and all that. And, it's a distinctive truck, and I have it painted a time or two now. And I just use it around the ranch. I don't tear it up, but I use it in my normal farming, unless I need four-wheel drive, then I go grab one of them. But, yeah.
Yeah, I love that truck. It's definitely one of my favorites.
At the SEMA show, I met the guy who was modifying those. Mm-hmm. He was making, you could only get them as a regular cab.
Right.
There's a guy in Upland, California, who was making the extended cab conversion for those, which I talked to him a while, but I said, I don't want to do that. But he did have, the Lightning came the first couple of years only with 2 bucket seats.
Right.
You did in a center console. Why wouldn't I be able to put 3 people in there? So I finally got from him the console that came in the later years and retrofitted that. So that's where the SEMA show was very helpful for me even back then.
Absolutely. Well, we're here in D.C. because we're talking about the EV mandate and the vote that's coming up for that. Now, you and I, both being from California, were directly impacted by the waiver that California was issued. And
yeah, without an act of the legislature or that, it was just done by
kind of passed through under the wire. Was it in December? And so now there's going to be a vote on it to determine its fate.
Yeah, Congressional Review Act in Congress to see if that can be required by the other states to also have to follow that. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how the vote comes out. Obviously, California choosing its own emissions or its EV mandate, the death of ICE, isn't just a California problem, it's a national problem because manufacturers aren't going to want to make 2 versions of cars.
Yeah, which frustrates me a little bit because the manufacturers want it really easy and make it all the same. So what they do is they go to the worst possible version and make it all the same as the bad version from an irresponsible state like mine. But there's a little parade of other states that want to be like California too. Like I don't know, there might be 7 states affected by this particular one that want to do this. So that's pretty frustrating because when I go around, I like to talk to normal people instead of just here in D.C.
Yeah,
nobody wants these cars. When I say nobody, it's like there's
a very narrow use case for them, and
it's usually the elites down in Santa Clara or people that want to use the sticker in California to be able to drive in the fast lane during rush hour. And others that it fits a niche for certain people. Okay, and if you want it, that's fine. But I'm really disappointed in the automakers just going hell bent to say everybody wants these electric cars. I mean, Chrysler really stepped on themselves by whatever they're called now. Stellantis sounds like
something that
sinking ship somewhere or something. But and I like Mopars. It isn't the Hemi. What a great success story it was all those many years. And I actually visited the dealer a while back to look at a Durango for my wife a little bit here, with the Hemi in it. So, but they're ruining the automotive experience, and all the young ones nowadays think, well, they don't really seem to care anymore. You know how many? It's surprising how many kids don't bother to get their driver's license until 17 or 18 or whenever their parents tell them to do it. I mean, we were expected to help be drivers back when I was a kid.
I have a 17-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
I'm pushing her, and she's about ready to. She's, kind of drug her feet. Now she wants to drive because she wants the freedom. I'm like, see? That's what I've been trying to tell you.
No kidding. No, I had my driver's license by 10 a.m. on my birthday at 16 years old. I was preloaded, ready to go on that, and I was driving that afternoon. I drove my grandmother up to the mountains there. It was the greatest thing, and then I did have available some pretty cool cars. My grandmother had a 57 Thunderbird that she let me drive to high school and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And lunchtime, we'd pop the top off and go cruise around, a couple friends or whatever. It didn't attract the girls, though, man. There wasn't many to pick from, though, either. So,
Well, so one of the problems with the EV mandate is, back to your point of manufacturers choosing one car to build, is that for states that don't follow California, they're impacted as well. It's really easy for people outside of California to say it's a California problem. But the reality is you're making vehicles more expensive for everybody. And I don't think people understand sort of the cancer that we have in California spreads throughout the rest of the country, especially in when it comes to car stuff.
And frequently when I get on a camera somewhere in front of a group of people that maybe from other states too, like, look, I'm from California. Don't do what we do, okay?
Yeah.
Please. and because that just gives it credence, it gives it, I don't know, some level of credibility, our bad ideas, and it comes from, the people elect these people to put these decisions in place, and they get mad if they don't have gas stoves anymore, or gasoline-powered vehicles, or diesel vehicles, or why everything's expensive.
All the things we love.
Yeah, stuff we love for sure. And everybody seems, when they go to the parades, they love to see the politician or the queen in the big old Cadillac convertible or whatever it is. They like it for that purpose, but then they get back legislating, oh my gosh, I need to get my name on a bill to show that I've helped save the world. And
do you think that's the reason? And why California? Why has California been the hotspot for taking away choice and removing consumers' ability to do what they want to do?
You want me to get political for a minute?
Absolutely.
Because they got a 3-to-1 ratio of Democrats in the legislature, and the governors, since Schwarzenegger, have been just hell-bent on doing this stuff too. We've gotten the notion that carbon dioxide is bad and harmful and evil, okay? And I'd ask your listeners to say, do you know what percent the atmosphere is made up of carbon dioxide? Do you know that number?
Not off the top of my head. What is it?
Most people will tell me somewhere, just a rough guess, because they got lives. I'm the one supposed to keep track of this stuff. It's between 20 and 50%.
Okay.
Some on the far fringes, it's 70%.
Okay.
So,
and oceans and trees need carbon dioxide.
Absolutely, plant life needs it. It would die off if we get below the number that I'm going to tell you in a second. It will start dying off. So, for people to understand how this has been made into a political weapon, the CO2, they're doing stupid things like high-speed rail in California to supposedly save car trips. Yeah,
the train to nowhere that nobody wants.
Nobody wants it except for people that get paid to build it and make money off of it.
And nobody will use it.
And a few environmentalists that somehow think this is a win. So the atmosphere is made up of 78% nitrogen gas, 21% oxygen. In third place is argon, 0.93%. And somewhere, when you look at your pie chart, in that last skinny little piece is the other. CO2 is in other, 0.04%. This is what we're completely changing our lives, exporting our economy, until Trump last night at the State of the Union and his efforts to, I was the first one out of the seat when he said getting rid of the crazy EV mandate at the federal level.
It was nice to see that he mentioned that during the State of the Union. Having that kind of visibility and that spotlight turned on is a big deal.
Yeah, so when you get down to 0.04% being the problem, and that's a rounding error, and CO2 is being made the weapon, the scary. You have guys like John Kerry saying it's the
guy that's on the airplane flying around.
Yeah, the guy flying to Davos, where all the other planes fly to Davos and have their climate nonsense. So hey, we need to do things to take care of the air and the water, and I think we're very conscious of that already. But when you have unmanaged forests, because the environmentalists, for example, sue everybody over trying to do a little bit of tree removal, brush removal, and you're going to damage the environment with all this mechanization. Then you burn 1 million acres like happened in my district. This gavel right here is made out of wood that came from that fire that they gave me so I can chair the subcommittee on forestry. This is what you get with the extreme environmentalists.
Well, and then you talk about carbon dioxide. Try having 1 million acres on a fire. You just undid everything that you did at the
10 years worth of cars in L.A. or something like that. Mount St. Helens erupts, more CO2 and other stuff comes out. I mean, we're chasing our tail here, and what we're doing is exporting our jobs and economy to places like China, and they'll eat it right up. They laugh at us for having been in the Paris Accords. They have no intention of following that.
Of course not.
They'll take what we give them, and so when we do this to ourselves, America innovates great technology when it's allowed to. It's not being hampered by regulations or other stupidity. But so our gasoline engines, our diesel engines are better burning and cleaner than they've ever been, right? And I'm not happy with this DEF we have to put in our trucks and things like that. But if it moves in the right direction and allows us to keep diesel trucks and diesel engines, then fine. I'm working on a legislation to make where the federal excise tax on new trucks is eliminated. That was put in place in World War I to help pay for World War I. So on a new truck.
You think we've paid for it by now?
I don't know. Have we paid for the Golden Gate Bridge yet? Okay. They got $11 tolls or something now too. But it's revenue is what it is. But so those trucks cost $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 extra on tax on top of the tax. They'll still collect their sales tax and FET tax on the rubber tires or whatever, but so if we can get rid of that, it might incentivize people to buy more trucks, update them. You got the cleaner engines, safety, and they're pretty cushy too.
What's the next step? So if this vote goes through, the EV mandate is revoked, does that lead into other legislative, hopefully, future victories? Does it put you in a place where you could look at things like California's ability to have its own regulations when it comes to emissions and things like that?
Well, California's been getting this ability via EPA waivers for a lot of years. And, back in 50s and 60s, there was a lot of, bad air in the LA basin and other areas. The San Joaquin Valley has that issue. A lot of it blows in from somewhere else. So you can see where things needed to improve. But when you talk about the CARB people in Sacramento, Air Resources Board, gets up every day and thinks up a new mandate. And they make it harder to get our hot rod parts, for example. If you don't get the EO number 100% on everything, then you don't get to have the part. Well, I might be the type of guy that gets it out of state and uses it anyway, but, screw these guys. But it's a deal where the bureaucrats don't give a rat's rear end about what we need or what we think. And then, what's sad is to watch the Detroit people all just fall in line. Oh, yeah, we can do these. A few years ago at the beginning of Obama, the CAFE standard for gas mileage was meant to, we had to average 27.5 miles per gallon by X year of all cars that are sold in the American fleet, or any fleet, I guess. That's easy for the Japanese guys. All they make is small cars. But we like choices in this country. We like SUVs and pickups and big cars and all that. So that mandate was something that was being worked towards, and we're kind of getting there. But then Obama comes along, and he wants to negotiate doubling that to, I think the standard was 54.5 mpg. Can you think of a 54.5 mpg car you want to buy or drive?
No.
It'd be like a coffin with 4 wheels on it. So, these tiny little, what's those cars?
The Prius or?
No, I hate those things, but because they represent.
Yeah, I get you.
I'll stop, but what are those little ones? They're 2-seater.
The smart cars.
Yeah, smart cars.
But not so smart.
Yeah, anything usually with the word smart in front of it that's been proposed by a politician is usually not smart.
If you have to self-proclaim intelligence, there's a problem there, right?
Right, like a man cave. If you have to put man in front of it, is it really a man cave, or something like that?
Right.
I wouldn't call it that,
Well,
so.
It's nice to hear you be real and to meet with a lawmaker that has our best interests at heart, because I think it's really easy to get disenfranchised. How important is it for people like me to come, and you say you talk to the average person, to interact with you, and do people who have something that they want to tell their representative, is it really matter that they write you, that they call you, that they visit you? Does that have an impact?
What's important is the tone a lot of times. When they come screaming at you at a town hall, or they write nasties, or they cuss out my people on the phone, that doesn't get you anything. Like the guy last night at the State of the Union speech, trying to stand up and wave his cane at the president. I know him, I chat with him, he's nice enough to talk one-on-one. And I was only a few feet from him. I wanted to go over and say to him, like, dude, you're not helping yourself. You're making yourself look like a jackass in front of everybody. That does not help your constituents or make them proud at home either. So when the tone of people, if you want to be constructive, and if you have a different idea, let's listen. Let's talk it through, and I'll have my view, and we'll talk about what the differences are and why it might work or might not work. And you hammer it out. And that's a negotiation. That's legislating. So it's important that you speak with your legislator or their representatives in a constructive fashion. And that's what I try and do with my colleagues of all types too, even the bureaucracy, which I want to, hurt sometimes. But it's, for example, what we're talking about here, our new EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, is a colleague I served with in the House. He's going to be great on this, and he's going to look at these things not from the science is settled, CO2 is nasty. He's looking at, it was just a pronouncement during the Obama administration, CO2 is a poisonous, horrific gas. Not according if you're a plant, So he's going to be re-looking at some of these things. And my colleague, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who I served with, he's looking immediately at this dumb high-speed rail project in California, which has quadrupled in price from what the voters were told back in 2008, of $33 billion, to at least $130 billion now. And they've only been able to corral all this time, with all this effort and all this convincing, They've only come up with $19 billion to put towards it. They're still $110 billion short. They've already tapped the American taxpayer with up to $8 billion of federal money, the Californians with about $9 billion of top bond money. Where's $110 billion to come from? It doesn't make a lick of sense. So when you got people in charge here that look at things from a common sense perspective, you got a chance now. And the EV mandates, when Mr. Zeldin is going to look at the EPA waiver that is granted to California, is this actually more harmful? Because federally, 49 state cars, they used to call them.
Right.
I have one, my Bronco. It's got a 4-barrel carburetor on the 351 because I found it. I was pretty happy with that.
Probably made it run a lot better too.
Sure. And so when he's going to look at these waivers that California keeps asking for, because they always just want to legislate for the heck of it, and as you said, it does affect other states. We're going to have a real look at this thing on EV mandates and the waiver at California weaponizes to make us jump through hoops. Are we going to have our trucks anymore? Am I going to be able to haul my rice with the Peterbilts anymore? I already have one that I'm only allowed 1,000 miles per year on, and I have to get a bunch of special permits for that. My other ones got taken away from me a long time ago.
When I heard that now they want to do quarterly emissions on some of these as well.
How much time am I going to spend driving back and forth to the emission place making emissions while I'm doing it,
right.
And while it's running
or
there?
Or arrest mods that are burned cleaner, but because the referee says something is missing, we don't do these common sense things, and we don't do these...
For a part you can't get anymore, maybe, right?
Sure.
I mean, I have a good...
Is it cleaner or not? That should be the litmus test.
Well, that's what I always thought. Why don't they just measure at the tailpipe? You got a good running car. Yeah. Who cares what's under the hood? Right. Every hot rod I've ever talked to, or just regular guy with a pickup or something, why do they care what's under the hood? Because it gives them power.
Yeah.
Now, my good pal in the state Senate, Shannon Grove, I see has introduced a bill, I think it might be number 712, that I just saw it last night, that's going to make 35-year-old and older cars exempt. I
hopefully rolling, I think, too,
I believe
right?
From the smog check. I hope it's rolling, because
fingers crossed.
I got a couple cars I'd like to
you and me both.
get into that too, because, honestly, I don't put that many miles on them. I collect them, I fix them up, but they don't get that many miles.
No, you just enjoy them.
In real life.
Gives you happiness.
Even though I'm paying insurance for them and all that stuff, it's probably kind of dumb, but we all get it as hot rodders. We don't care. We love the cars. We want to be able to drive them and use them without somebody following me around with a sniffer. And it's ridiculous what California. So that's why the federal level, Lee Zeldin is going to be looking at this stuff on EPA waivers, and also Sean Duffy. Well, more on the dumb high-speed rail, which is supposed to replace cars or replace Southwest Airlines. So.
Not going to do either in my life.
We're getting a lot of good help here from the Trump administration on our basic freedoms to keep a gas stove, a gas car, a gas leaf blower.
I had an electric stove in my house, and we moved our water heater when it's a 65 house, moved it to the outside, and so I had the stub line to where the water heater was in the closet, and I ran it to my kitchen so I could put in a gas stove and oven because I like to cook, right? And then when they're talking about taking it away, I'm like, over my dead body, you take away my gas stove, right?
Yeah, we'll bootleg the stuff, right?
Yeah, well.
Sure. It's whatever we have to do, because people are...
Can I call you if I get in trouble?
Yeah, I'll bring a foot-long hot dog with a file in it and help bust you out of jail.
Deal.
So, but we need to back each other up on this, and the people that love the hobby, that love the industry, need to be vocal too. And when I watch these big three automakers and others just fly back here, like during the Obama administration, I think each one came in their own jet to fight the CAFE standard back in 2009 or whichever year it was during the Obama era, and said, oh yeah, we can meet the 54.5 mile per gallon mandate. You're selling me out. You're selling your real customers out. Because most cars that people want to buy range somewhere around, I'd say an average of 33 miles per gallon, or a little less or a little more. Notwithstanding the Prius drivers that want to feel good about themselves, but it's really taking away individual choice for things that are comfortable for them. What's good for them.
Or serve a need. My EV's not going to serve my need at my rural property or something like that. I need a truck for that.
Well, the dealer, when I go in and talk to them, there's a guy that comes up from Sacramento in the EV Ford pickup, and he's afraid that he can't go to all his stops on that charge. Like, well, what are we doing to ourselves? You heard the story about the guy that bought a Ford electric and wanted to go camping with it, took his family, had it all up. He made it about 1 or 2 states away. He couldn't find any place to charge, and so he finally, I think, 2 states away, traded in and bought a Dodge diesel, and finished his vacation, So we're forcing this on people, and the technology for batteries isn't there, the charging stations aren't there, and I think most people don't want to have to expend a vehicle that costs 150% for the same vehicle or so than what they're used to. They don't want to be forced into this stuff, and Newsom in California is cramming it down our throats, some of it by year 2030, some by 2035, whatever round number they make up,
fast.
They pull it out of the air, it sounds good. Some by 2045 on getting rid of everything. So what I hope happens, and kind of has happened before, is that they'll hit the wall on the mandate and nobody's able to comply and nobody's able to have anything. CARB, I think in 1990, tried to make a rule that says 10% of all cars had to be zero emissions by 2000. You're driving around at the Ford dealer with a little golf cart thing. They called it, I think, a Think.
I think, yep.
Yeah, it looked like something Tattoo would use on Fantasy Island or something.
Yep.
And they put license plates on that. They tried to call that a car. Yep. Nobody's going to buy that thing unless you live on a golf course.
Well, Congressman, I know you're busy. I really appreciate your time, and it's nice to know that we've got real people, real car people who are willing to have this type of back and forth. And as a fellow California resident, can we work on gas prices next?
Drill, baby, drill. And then you still have to relieve yourselves from the politicians in California that stop energy production and tax it to death. And they think of a new tax all the time. There's going to be a new 65-cent tax that they had to hold off on. I mean, how much are the voters going to put up with? They think we're all going to go electric all the time and that's going to be nirvana? Not a chance. So people need to wake up as to what their politicians are doing to them in California, as well as what they might be doing at the federal level. But Trump is really working to help save the day on our choices right now. So I'm really happy about last night and the direction he's going with his cabinet. So it's pretty exciting here, but when I land at home, I still feel like I'm landing in a bunch of alligators. So,
well, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I better bolt. I got to get to the floor.
And last but not least, I'd like you to meet Representative Riley Moore from West Virginia. All right, so I'm sitting here in Congressman Riley Moore's office. You represent the 2nd District of West Virginia?
2nd District.
So I've got a lot of West Virginia listeners, and the show's about trucks, but we cover all sorts of stuff. But it's nice to be able to come in and meet with a friendly.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, as a Californian who owns an EV, but also owns a V8 Jeep and a plug-in hybrid, different vehicles for different use cases, I've had consumer choice. And yet my state is trying to take that choice away and put it across the country with other states that are aligned with them. I'm curious on the West Virginia perspective of that and why California is in a position where they can mandate. And again, as a Californian, as an EV owner, I don't want this because I want to continue to have the right vehicle for the job and the right use case.
Well, they shouldn't be able to. I think there's a lot of issues as it relates to California, but part of it is I don't like the whole referendum setup that they do all the time and all these ballot initiatives and this and that. What's the point of even electing people to go to the legislature if you're just going to put it out to the people anyway? But that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah, I mean, the EV thing for West Virginia, I mean, it doesn't really comport with our topography, geography, and population and lifestyle whatsoever, and the type of jobs and everything else that we do. I'll give you just an example. The 2nd Congressional District, so from where I live to the other end of it is just over 4 hours. There's not a bunch of charging stations in between here and there. There's a lot of mountains, and if it's the winter, it's a lot of snow and this and that. It just doesn't make any sense. So, we've made the choice, as long as they're allowing us to, which the president announced very clearly he's going to rectify that EV mandate situation. Thank God for that. Is that we want vehicles that generally are 4-wheel drive. Mm-hmm. That's important to us. I got a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Everybody has 4-wheel drive vehicles. I mean, there's dirt roads, mountains.
How about towing? I mean, there's no charging station. Very rarely that there's a pull-through, right? What do you do? Unhook your trailer and then charge for an hour, hook your trailer back up because you can only pull in. Then what do you do with your trailer? I mean, just from those types of really basic practicality standpoints, we haven't solved those issues yet.
Yeah, I mean, good indication of that is I've never even heard of it until you just mentioned it right now. It doesn't exist in West Virginia at all. I'm just... The whole thing is being subsidized, though, and it's just like anything, unfortunately, in the green energy space right now. is they're trying to force consumer behavior rather than giving us the choice, which is the whole point of the free market.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look at, where I am, we're the epicenter of electrification. We have the most robust charging infrastructure probably anywhere in the country. And you still have to wait in line. You still have broken chargers. The user experience is still not there.
Yeah.
Even if you have a level 2 charger at home, you may be able to have a small battery EV that you can top off. But if you have a big truck battery EV, it may take 40 hours to charge it at home. And then if you go and find a fast charger or go on a trip somewhere, most of the ones along the highway system that aren't Tesla, which really, invested in their large supercharger setups, are third parties like an EVgo or Electrify America. And there might be 3, 4, 6 chargers. And now, especially on the highway system route, you've got lines. So now, you can't recharge in 5 minutes. Then you also have to wait, and so you're at an hour there, and then whatever the guy in front of you is waiting. It's not a great experience, and it's nice to see that there's people in Congress that are willing to look at the entire picture and not be so focused on, we have to push this through because we think this is the future.
Yeah, to me, you've seen this before, and this is a bit of a overstatement on it, but when you take away consumer choice and you're forcing behaviors within a populace, that creates lines, and we've seen that before. Those countries were communist, right?
True.
They were given just one choice in one place to be able to do this one thing, buy bread or whatever it might be. That's the beauty of the free market, right? Is that there's going to be different types of products and services based on what your needs are and requirements and budget and all the other types of things that go into that. So, this is a forcing function. I don't think the American people like this at all. They don't like it in my district, I can tell you that. And, look, some people like EVs. That's great. Good for you. That's awesome. I don't want to drive one, but some people do.
I think people see this issue as a car enthusiast issue or a California issue. But the reality is the California virus, in a sense, spreads. So there's many states that are attached to what California does. And it's not an enthusiast issue. It's an everybody issue because manufacturers aren't going to want to make vehicles that are different for different parts of the country. They're going to want to make one vehicle. And that raises the price for somebody in West Virginia. Whether or not they're tied to the California EV mandate waiver or not, they're still going to be paying more for a car that they don't want. And my other concern is, what happens in the secondary market, the used car market? Do you want a 10-year-old Dell computer? What's going to happen when these battery packs are at 80% of their life and the range isn't there and the car isn't as capable? Is there going to be a robust used car market? And then going back even further, you look at the secondary market with ICE vehicles. That would be the area you would go. If you can't afford a new car today, you might get something that's a lease return that's 2 years old or 5 years old, or you might find somebody who took care of their car and it's 10 years old. And that's the car that you can afford. But what happens, you go back to right to repair and the John Deere tractors on the ag side and things like that, those ICE vehicles are going to become just as expensive as the new EV cars because the demand is going to go up. And now where is somebody going to go to get into an affordable car?
Yeah, and the sad thing about it is it particularly hurts and affects the rural parts of America.
Absolutely.
We're the ones that are going to suffer the most. We don't have public transportation in any significant or meaningful way. And there's a couple buses and some towns in my district, or really the state of West Virginia for that matter. So if you don't have a car that's reliable, you're not going to work. You just can't get there. Or you're going to have to find a ride with somebody. So, it really is for us in rural America, necessary part of life is being able to have a vehicle and being able to get around.
Yeah, I've got some family property that's rural in California, and there's no way I would be able to go visit it or do any of the things in an EV. There is no infrastructure there. And so I can imagine there's a lot of Americans that live in rural areas. And we've talked to some other lawmakers, and I pointed out, I'm a Californian. I own an EV because the leases were great and subsidized, and it's great for the purpose of around town and taking the kids to school in suburbia. I don't want the EV mandate. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, are there more Congress people who are of your point of view? Do you feel good that we can get this removed?
Yeah, I feel 100% confident in it, that it's going to get removed. I have no doubt in it. And I mean, the conference is completely aligned on this.
Do you see this being a gateway issue into some of the other waivers and things that are allowed by states such as California? If this gets revoked, will there be other things you go after next, such as the emissions waiver where California can have its own emissions separate from the federal regulations? Does this open that door for those discussions downstream?
I think so. I mean, we're going to be looking at a lot of these things through a CRA, obviously, because that's how most of this took place. And I mean, we just did one not in your wheelhouse, but on gas hot water heaters just last week. So I mean, it's across the board affecting people in their homes. It's affecting their vehicles. It's affecting the way they live their lives.
There's no way they're taking my gas stove from me. I mean,
not now. We're in charge, so don't worry. Your gas stove's in good shape.
My house was built in '65, and it was built near an aerospace plant. And so these houses were like the houses of the future when they were built.
Yeah.
So they were all electricity, 100 amp panel, and the ovens were electricity, and the stovetops were electricity. Well, I moved my water heater to the outside of the house, and I had a gas line just sitting in this closet stubbed off. So opened up the ceiling and ran that sucker when we redid the kitchen, and I got my gas stove and my gas oven. And I didn't invest in that so that somebody can tell me I can't replace it.
Yeah. No, we're getting everybody covered on all those household appliances, which it's a sad state of affairs and commentary on the whole situation that we have to do that, but we do.
Yeah, I don't understand why we can't just live our lives. Why is there always somebody trying to take something from us or make life more difficult? It seems like, from my perspective, this side is live and let live, and the other perspective is how can we be more involved in your life?
Well, I'd say, if I can, I think you're missing the point. And part of it is about control. And the control side of it, in which they're trying to control the type of vehicle you drive, type of oven you have, and all of that, is that they know better than you know. And they are going to help you live a more productive life, and one that is a low carbon footprint and takes into account the whole global citizenry here and all these other types of things that if you're super rich and shop at Whole Foods, you probably think about all the time. But for the regular individual, no, that's not the case. They just want to be left alone and live their lives. And so this does come down to control. I mean, BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink, talked about this, I think it was about a year or two ago. And this whole ESG movement's going on in the financial markets and talking about forcing behaviors. And that's correct. That's exactly what they're trying to do, is trying to force behaviors. And unfortunately, from their perspective, they think they understand the way that we all should be living our lives. And so that's why the control mechanism is so integral to that entire ideology.
Do you feel like we're getting back on track to where we should be, where the tradition of Americans in America to be free, to make those choices, to have self-sufficiency, live independently without the government being involved in everything? Are we headed back there?
Oh, yeah, we are. Look, 77 million Americans just spoke very loudly on that in the presidential election, which was a huge victory for the president. And so we have the White House, we got both chambers of Congress, unified government. So I think they spoke very loudly and clearly that, yes, freedom, we want it back. Yeah. And that's what the president is looking at here. I mean, and when I go back to that word control, it's not just this, you're not here to talk about it, but think about freedom of speech.
Sure.
That's another thing that's being controlled in this country right now. So that's kind of the operative word, I'd say, that is the straight through line on their entire ideology is control.
What are you most excited about being in Congress? Are there initiatives that are important to West Virginians, to yourself personally, or any laws that your constituents who are listening to this podcast would be excited to hear about?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of them, but I'd say one that's really exciting for West Virginia and always is, exciting when we have President Trump and frightening when we don't, which is energy. We're the 5th largest energy producer in the country, and we do coal, gas, oil, we do it all. And the unleashing of American energy that President Trump talked about last night, which he has been talking about through his campaign and now as President of the United States, is going to do a lot for the state of West Virginia, but it's going to do a lot for the country. You talked about these batteries and all this electrical requirement out here. There's folks have talked about this terawatt challenge. How are we going to meet an additional terawatt of energy? Just one data center takes a gigawatt,
right?
Which coal-fired power plant could meet a gigawatt. That's nearly 1 million households. Just to put that in perspective, that is a lot of energy, a lot. And you're not, unfortunately, going to be able to do that in the green energy space. If you wanted a gigawatt of energy, you'd have, I think it's 3.5 million solar panels running around the clock to be able to do that. There's an issue there as it relates to density and space and consistency and reliability. Sure, it can be part of the grid. It can't be the driving force of the grid, though.
I like to say it's a tapestry, right? It's just part of the tapestry. Just like EVs could be part of the tapestry. Siemens here, and they're technology neutral. Mm-hmm. Have the choice. Let the free market decide.
Let the free market decide. Look, maybe somebody comes up with a solar panel that's can do a gigawatt. Great, that's cool. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great innovation, but I don't want to subsidize ideas that aren't working.
Right. Or put the finger on the scale for things that are still competing in their space for other technologies like hydrogen or fuel cells.
Yeah, hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Looks like we might be getting a hydrogen hub in West Virginia, which is super exciting. A lot of that one for us is huge because it drives so much of the economy.
You mentioned earlier in our interview, you have a 4-wheel drive. What do you drive?
I got a Suburban.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
I got a Suburban. Well, and then we got, I got a, Karen Ford Bronco. No, it's a Jeep person over here.
Don't worry, I got you on the couch here. We're good.
Yeah. So, those 2 vehicles we got right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I know you're busy. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for talking about the West Virginia perspective, and good luck with repealing the EV mandate.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right. Well, that was quite the episode. Sorry for the length of this one, but I really felt like I wanted to get as much of those interviews in there with as little editing as possible. And I hope you found it interesting to see how those meetings went and what we talked about when we went to advocate for the automotive aftermarket up on Capitol Hill. And if you've been inspired by this episode to join the cause to end the EV mandate and support automotive businesses, you can visit semacra.org. It'll help you send a letter to your personal lawmaker. Well, I hope you enjoyed our big show and getting a little glimpse of what it was like to meet with legislators within the walls of Capitol Hill. And I want to hear from you. TruckShowPodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on the 5-star hotline, 657-205-6105. What did you think of the show?
The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show, oh, oh.
And if you go to social, either at Truck Show Podcast or at Sean P. Holman, I put a bunch of photos up there from our visit. You can see who I met with, what it was like within the walls of Congress. You can see some videos. I made some reels walking around Capitol Hill, all that kind of cool stuff. So go ahead and check that out. And while you're there on Facebook, join the Facebook group, the Podshed Insiders. So much cool stuff still happening in there. Love that you guys are so interactive. Also, send me events, truckshowpodcast.com. My kiddo Marin, she's been doing a great job, so she's ready with a new batch. See what events are happening in your neck of the woods. Make sure you go to truckshowpodcast.com to the events tab and send us some Know Your Notes. I'm going to stockpile those for hopefully an upcoming listener show. I'm aiming for maybe sometime in April is kind of what I'm thinking, so I'm going to put that out there for you guys right now. Again, give me your feedback, truckshowpodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear it. Okay, thank you, Nissan. Nissan has been with Truck Show Podcast for so long. Such a great partner. They make a great vehicle. The Nissan Frontier, the Nissan Armada. Head on down to your local dealership or to nissanusa.com. See what all the fuss is about. A lot of value, but it's value because the price is right, not because it's a cheap vehicle and you don't get what you need. It feels like you're getting a deal because all the other vehicles are so expensive out there, and these are great, great vehicles. AMSOIL, they make the best oil out there, the best synthetics, amazing, amazing quality control, amazing products. Love our friends over at AMSOIL, and you can go to amsoil.com. You can get motor oil. They've got a motor oil designed for everything. Your kid's old hybrid, your high mileage hot rod, your performance vehicle, your diesel. They got car care products, and they also have a ton of different greases and lubes. In fact, I use their NLGI number 2 on my personal Wrangler. So it's all great stuff. Car care products. I mean, just go down the line, amsoil.com. They got everything you need. And listen, if you do your own oil changes, just get their oil change kit. It comes with everything you need in a box because the oil you want comes with gloves. It comes with a sticker, like all that stuff. New filter, everything you need. One-stop shop, all right? amsoil.com. Kershaw.kaiusa.com. That's the website to go get yourself a Kershaw knife. I saw a couple people in the past week post pictures of their custom knives that they recently got. So super rad. Saw that on the Podshed Insiders. I think anybody, if you have questions about Kershaw knives, ask Podshed Insiders. Those guys have been buying knives like crazy, and I think they've all been super impressed by the quality and the knife. So we've got a great partnership. Get yourself 40% off MSRP and free shipping. OVR Mag, obviously near and dear to my heart. That's my other venture. I'm offering to you guys a year to our digital library for free. Just use the code @TruckShowPodcast, and I think we also give you a 10% discount if you decide you want print. Please help support the cause with OVR. If you love overlanding, off-roading, adventure, gear, we do it all in OVR. I think it's definitely worth a look. Go check it out. Would love to have everybody who listens to the Truck Show Podcast be a subscriber on OVR Magazine. All right. As always, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for tuning in week after week to hear me pontificate about all things automotive and some things not automotive. Come back next week and we'll do it again. See ya.
The Truck Show Podcast is a production of Truck Famous LLC. This podcast was created by Sean Holman and Jay Tillis, hosted by Sean Holman, and uses production elements by DJ Omar Khan and Jay Tillis. If you like what you've heard, please open your Apple Podcast or Spotify app and leave us a 5-star review. And if you're a fan, there's no better way to support the show than by sharing it and patronizing our sponsors. Some vehicles may have been harmed during the making of this podcast.
Hey guys, it's Lauren with the SEMA Action Network here in Washington, and we had some breaking news come out over the weekend. Late Friday night, the EPA ordered Congress review California's electric vehicle mandate waiver for the very first time. After voters overwhelmingly rejected candidates supporting EV mandates in November, the Biden administration, in their final days as a parting gift, approved a waiver for California, letting them set their own vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards. Now, it is California, and their standard of choice was an internal combustion engine ban. Let's be clear, the Clean Air Act does allow the EPA to approve these waivers for California only, but it does have to be under compelling and extraordinary condition. Are there really extraordinary conditions right now that warrant a ban on your engine? We may never know. And you may be wondering, if I'm not in California, why should I care about this? Right now, there are already 11 other states that are locked in to follow whatever California does with their greenhouse gas emission policies. So what now? On day one of Trump's new administration, he released a flurry of executive orders, one of which focusing on the EPA and electric vehicle mandates. It detailed instructions for the EPA to engage Congress using powers granted in the Congressional Review Act, or the CRA, to halt the waiver granted to California permanently. And you know how it can be in Washington. Everyone's always using fancy lingo to make themselves feel smarter than everyone else. But it's not as complicated as they want us to believe. The CRA, or the Congressional Review Act, basically just allows Congress to review regulations passed by federal agencies within the past 60 days. Congress isn't about it. All they need to do is pass something called a resolution of disapproval, which only requires a simple majority. Like I said, on Friday, the EPA officially sent California's waiver to be reviewed by Congress using the CRA. This this triggered a 60-day clock, meaning there were only 60 days for Congress to introduce and pass a resolution of disapproval in order for the EV mandates to be officially done. It's game time. We have 60 days to pass the resolution and end EV mandates once and for all. So be sure to be following SEMA Action Network on our Instagram and Facebook to stay tuned for updates as this moves through Congress. And make sure to click the link in our bio and hit join the fight to sign up for text and email alerts to learn how to best contact your representative to make sure they vote in line to pass the resolution of disapproval. Be sure to share our page and the link far and wide within the automotive community. This is an all hands on deck fight and we can't do it without your help. Stay tuned for updates and we'll be in touch soon.